So, Mike, would you like to start off with yellow belt and green belt training for Lean Six Sigma?
Sure. I'm actually going to start off with some updates on so I know we are recording, or we do our best to try to make sure that we record these sessions. I'm in the middle of kind of a big revamp of the BPMO webpage, which includes getting all of our past videos captioned. So hopefully in the next month and a half, our website's gonna be updated and all our videos are gonna be captioned and published. So I've had to make sure that I'm in compliance with our captioning of our videos, which apparently I wasn't. So I've had to redo them. So that's one. That's the update on that piece. On the yellow belt and green belt training, the yellow belt sessions, the ones that they are filling up fairly quickly. We still have classes on the website openings in August through December, I believe. And we have a few sessions for groups that I've reached out to schedule specifically for them. So we're available to do that also. And I got an email recently from Seamus with a bunch of folks, I think 30 something folks from BRS. And so we're going to be scheduling some specific sessions for them as well. So if you're on that list, be on the lookout. As far as the Greenbelt training, I've been working with Edwin Boone, the CEO from the Lean Six Sigma company, um, trying to figure out some how we can best calendar some additional Greenbelt and Black Belt trainings. And so I promise this will be on the website by tomorrow. We do have some dates for Greenbelt trainings in July with an optional add-on for black belt for those of you that would be interested in doing the black belt. So the way that would work is the green belt class is 6 days in person, and it's usually like a Monday through Wednesday one week, and then a Monday through Wednesday the next week, and then after that. It's going to be if you take that class, or if you've already taken a green belt class with us, then you can do black belt virtually, which is another 3 days, but it's 3 days virtual for the black belt. Okay, so I'll put all the information on the website. So that's going to be in July, and I'm working with Edwin to get something similar in end of August, and then the last one for the year would probably be October, November timeframe for green belt slash black belt classes. Okay, but again, yellow belts are always going to be available throughout the year. Okay.
Thank you, Mike. And I think I, we are not quite at a year mark yet of when we've kind of started this recent effort of doing both. Pretty much started with yellow belt, and now we're starting to move into green belt training. So it's great to see the campus response to this. And I don't know if do you have offhand an idea how many we've done yellow belt training for, Mike?
Nearing 120.
That's impressive. So that's great to see that again the response from campus. Okay, so I mentioned at the start of this that we are coming up with the last this is the last PCN session for this fiscal year. As part of that, we are kind of preparing for our upcoming roadmap of topics. On Friday, you likely would have received an email from Priya on our team that included kind of a survey that would get your feedback for the topics that have been impactful to you this last year and what you would like to see for the upcoming year. The survey for that is also linked in the agenda that you see on the calendar invite for today's session. So if you have not yet given your feedback on that, we definitely would appreciate it. We want to have the direction and content for the Process Champion Network driven by the members of this community. So definitely give your input as soon as you can. We'll probably send reminders out during this week. And between today's session and the next one, which will be in August, we'll send out some kind of summary of what the roadmap for the upcoming topics look like. And I think Priya also just dropped the link to the survey in the chat. So if you've not yet done that, or you want to do it while we're in this session or following, please do.
And Nick,
Uh, Go ahead,
Nick,
Mike.
before you do your process manager, I do have one more quick announcement. I'd feel bad if I didn't announce that. That and Evelyn, I don't mean to put you on the spot, but Evelyn Feng is on this call, and she just started with us on June 9th, June 11th, and her first. So Evelyn is a student assistant in the BPMO team. So I'm letting everyone know that because if you she's going to be helping me with the green belt and yellow belt registrations and trainings. And so if you see anything from Evelyn, she's part of the BPMO team as a student assistant. And her first day working for BPMO was actually taking a full day yellow belt class. So thanks, Evelyn. She jumped right in. So I just want to introduce everyone to Evelyn.
All right, last announcement on here is actually both a kind of heads up for everyone, but more of a congratulations to this community as a whole. As you know, we've kind of highlighted different metrics about number of processes that have been created in Process Manager, but also process views. How often the content that you all have been creating has been viewed by individuals and people that you've shared it to on your websites or your process performers viewing the content. We have hit 100,000 views. That is cumulative for the use up to this point. Uh, this milestone kind of snuck up on us. It was between somewhere last week, this week. But again, this is really a shout out to you all for the work that you've been doing, creating content, sharing it, and using that content to really manage your processes. So again, congratulations to this community. All right. So as I mentioned, the PCN roadmap topics, we're going to be updating this. We'll send a email out between this session and next, but this is what we've gone through this last year, and a lot of you have been participating in this. So again, great to see this community continue to grow. All right. So with that, I'm going to hand off to Chris DeMarco, who's going to be leading our topic for today. So let me go ahead and switch over and let you share, Chris.
Thanks, Nick. I appreciate it. All right. Once my screen pops up there, can everybody see my screen? Screen looks good. Yes, no, cool. All right. I'm Chris DeMarco. I'm with the Business Process Management Office. It's great to see everybody. And I know many of you, there are plenty of you I do not know, but it's really nice to see this continue to grow. So today's topic is process ownership. Right up front, I just want to say that this tends to be one of the hardest topics in the world of process. And I'm sure you'll have a lot of questions as I go through this. I am going to just set the stage with some what process ownership is, why it's important, and then we're going to get to a much more fun exercise. As we mentioned, as Nick mentioned earlier, we have Janet Spear with us. We're going to do a little Q&A with Janet. Janet is a process owner in Central Services in People and Culture. First off, thank you, Janet. That's going to be really exciting. I'm excited. Janet's been a real advocate of this work. I've learned a ton from Janet about process adherence and what this can look like on our campus. So we're completely honored to have Janet here to do a little Q&A at the end here. So I'm going to move through this pretty quick, and if you have questions, throw them in the chat. I'll stop along the way. But just really defining what process ownership is, why it's very important, and then we'll get to talk to a process owner on our campus to really set the stage for what this looks like on our campus. So defining process ownership. As an umbrella, process ownership is really about the accountability and the responsibility for the performance, the effectiveness, and the continuous improvement of a specific process. A process owner ensures that the process is clearly defined and documented, measured, and aligned with the organizational goals. They really serve as this central point of coordination for all the activities and the stakeholders and subject matter experts that are involved in the specific process. So that's just kind of the definition. I want to jump out in front of this and just make sure we're really clear of the difference here between a project sponsor and a process owner, or project sponsorship and process owner. They're very different things. And we did a session on change management and project management together, and we talked a lot about sponsorship. But just to be really clear up front, the difference here, when you hear the word sponsor or we're talking about sponsorship, that usually implies a project. A project sponsor is responsible for allocating resources, removing roadblocks, and really building the coalition of stakeholders for a project. That's a project sponsor. You may work with a project sponsor, and it's possible that one is a process owner too, but not likely. Process ownership, as I mentioned, is really the person who has the ultimate responsibility for the performance of a process and making sure we can realize the objectives that that process seeks to accomplish through measurements, metrics, key performance indicators. And this person really has the authority and the ability to make the necessary changes and improvements to the process, working with all those subject matter experts. So I just want to set that forth to make sure we're really clear that project sponsors and process ownership are different things. Okay. Any questions really quickly? Anything not clear as I move on here? Great. Peter, I see your hand up there.
Um, yeah, thanks, Chris. So would the process owner be like in a racing model, like somebody with an R versus the sponsor is somebody with an A?
It could be. I mean, I think that is one certain possibility. I think that the difference, though, is depending on whether the RACI was applied at the project level or at the organizational level, right? Because a process owner can also have an R and an A as well,
Oh,
depending
okay.
on how it looks. A project can be about a system implementation, or a project can be about a process improvement initiative, right? That looks at a specific project. So the R's and A's can shift around. There's no perfect answer to that. It's a really great question. And go ahead, Mike, you can add some content to
Yeah,
that.
so if I could add, just it's a different mindset, like Chris said, and I think an easy way to think of it is thinking about the definition of a project, right? A project is something that has a beginning and an end, comes and goes, right? So a project starts, there's an end date. You have a project sponsor that's accountable, active, engaged sponsor to make sure that this project gets done, right? There might be a process involved with this project that's already existing or has been improved, or a new process that's going to be embedded into the fabric of the organization. That process needs a process owner to own that process forever, or as long as the process is around. Now, could the project sponsor and the process owner be the same person? Maybe, maybe not. Does that help?
Yes, thank you.
And
Yes,
just
thank you.
Thanks, Peter. Just before I jump to the next slide, just really quickly, because we're going to be talking to Janet later, one of the things I want to just provide a little more clarity to, as I provided this definition, I said a process owner is over a specific process. That's accurate and true. It can also be over a body of processes, like in Janet's case. Janet oversees a lot of processes in a process architecture or a hierarchy in her end-to-end area. But a process owner is also over individual and specific processes as well. So it can be both. I just wanted to define that. Okay. Some key aspects just to dive a little deeper of process ownership. Accountability, oversight, improvement, alignment, and collaboration. Some bolded words on the screen there. Really important words, but the key is really along the bottom here. You'll notice in the blue banner, the first word there is problem solving. The second one is facilitating. The third one is team building. Fourth one is prioritization. And the fifth is managing change. What we're really doing when we think about these words around process ownership is becoming better problem solvers. We're placing ourselves in the middle of subject matter experts. We might not be, as a process owner, the most knowledgeable, but we need those that are. We have enough knowledge and accountability to these processes, right? So we need to work on our facilitation of those subject matter experts to get all the information into the process to be able to measure it, which leads to the team building and really prioritizing the work and what's important. And then we have the ability to change things. Okay, so accountability, right? The process owner is ultimately responsible for the success or failure of a process, has the oversight to see process design the implementation of these processes on our campus, and the performance monitoring of whatever we're using as health metrics of the process and what the process is looking to achieve. Improvement initiatives, we can, a process owner can really lead these and identify and implement improvements based on the data and the feedback we get from the campus. And we're really growing in maturity on the campus to start to think about how our processes sit in what we call alignment, right? Making sure that these processes support the institutional goals of our campus, the year-over-year strategic planning that we do, and align to the projects that might align to the strategic plan as they happen too. And oftentimes on our campus, because of being an institution of higher education and a public institution, those things often involve compliance as well. So process is really important here. And then lastly, collaboration, really working across units and departments. When I talk about process ownership, some people look at me and they're like, I can't own that. That has to go all the way over on the finance side, and I'm over on research. Okay, that's true, but you have to go work with those people. If you start that process and you are responsible for that process, and it has to go all the way over in the finance and come all the way back, and whatever you're doing, you are still responsible for that and getting their knowledge and helping collaborate together. I can't stress that last one enough. Okay. Those are some key aspects of process ownership. Any questions? Moving to the responsibilities, these are not all encompassing, but these are a few or 8 really good ones about thinking about what the responsibility is of being a process ownership, really knowing what's critical about the process. Again, I mentioned a lot of performance data. What are we using in order to know what's critical? It's not just the loudest voice. Voice of the customer, for all you Lean Six Sigma people, know how important that is, but it doesn't mean one loud voice. We want to hear that person too, or that voice too. But we need data to help us understand what's really going on. That includes making sure these processes are documented and that they're adhered to. When I met Janet, she came on this campus and I was getting my black belt, and she was the first person to look at me and say the words process adherence on the campus. And that's probably a decade plus ago. And that was my first meeting with Janet. I lit up like a light bulb. I was like, wow, there are like-minded people here, right? Process adherence is big. If we don't have it documented and we're not measuring it, we can't have our people adhere to these processes. Really big. We got to update them regularly. We got to make sure that we have some sort of process management control in place, checks and balances, holding regular reviews. Important for a process owner to be able to connect and collaborate on campus and hold some kind of reviews to make sure that these improvements are identified through projects and then incorporated into the process documentation that we have on our campus. Process manager being the lead one, but again, it doesn't matter what you use. We'd love you to use process manager, but as long as we have health metrics for our processes and we're holding reviews and we're adhering to the process, that's more important. The 7th one is providing linkages to customers and end users. These are our clients, our partners, and suppliers of the process. And then we really want to make sure the people doing the work, the process performers, have the training and resources to understand, utilize this process, and do their job very well. Okay. Any questions on the responsibilities? Again, there's a lot more, but these are the main 8 we like to put forth to get us to think about. What happens if we don't have process ownership? Again, this is hard. We're all thinking, I'm sure there's a lot of questions out there. What does it really mean on our campus? What if, everybody's doing things differently? Yes. What if we don't have process ownership, right? We get a lack of accountability. Again, hard to get adherence if someone's not looking after whether we're standardizing and following processes. Process owners are accountable for helping look towards process adherence and improving that and driving standardization. We all love to say how complex Berkeley is. It is. But so are the massive biotech companies all over the world that have global hubs and 80,000 employees and have their processes standardized. So while yes, higher education is complex and Berkeley is complex, we should still strive to look to standardize where we can. Inefficiency and waste tends to creep up if we're not having a process owner involved. For those of you who've taken Lean Six Sigma, you now know the 8 types of waste. You'll hear me mention a few. The next one, errors, defects, types of waste that happen when we don't have process ownership in place tend to be more prone to errors. We really lack a voice and a central point of contact when we don't have process ownership. We might have hundreds or thousands of people, let's just take HR, performing an HR process. It's really nice to have one voice. It doesn't mean that voice has, that voice still needs to work with the subject matter experts that do this process. But if you have one voice, it's much easier and a central point of contact to start to have that process have a voice. And if you do have that, the next one of delayed decisions really gets helped as well, right? If we don't have a process owner, we don't empower the subject matter experts or the process performers of the process to really make the decisions to make the process better. And that's what we're doing. I want to be really clear here. A process owner, they might be the ultimate decision, but they're empowering those that do the work to make those decisions too. Okay. And then obvious in our institution of higher ed, compliance issues come creeping, but if we have visibility and we've documented our process, right, it really helps us look. If we get audited and we can go look at processes, it will help us, I promise you. When we get audited and we have to pull things and we don't have a process to look at, it's much harder. And the auditors, no matter what institution they're coming from, right, they hit us harder. Okay, so those are the risks of not having a process owner. And then this just really helps us think about the why, right? I usually like to start with the why, but I buried it a few slides in just so we could set some foundation, right? Again, this is summarizing a lot of what I said, but you have 3 moving left to right. Here you have 3 big decision boxes, right? It helps us make decisions that matter. It helps us empower process improvement. We know nothing's perfect. The more we can live in a continuous improvement cycle with regular check-ins and make these processes better, the better we will be. And it really allows and facilitates the ability to collect and respond to feedback. Okay. How many times do we get frustrated by no decisions being made, right? I wish I could do this. I wish this process was different. Working with your subject matter experts and a process owner together, we can make that happen, right? It's really in partnership with others that process owners succeed. And again, voice of the customer, client, and partner is first in the process world, right? So we're really looking for these 3 boxes to work together so that we can own the change. When you're feeling frustrated, like this process could be better, be the change. Talk to a process owner or be one yourself. Get those people together, talk about it, get a joint consensus, make quick changes, live in that PDCA cycle of continuous improvement. Being a process owner really allows change to take place, and it drives process maturity on campus, right? That's what we're trying to do, is work together, speak the same language, give our processes the voices they need. It means that someone is responsible and accountable for these specific processes we are talking about on the campus. Okay, before we get into the fun part with Janet, this is just a take home. I'm not going to read this slide, but you will get all these slides. This is a summary in these 4 boxes of everything I've said. So it's a nice 1-page take home that we have to really let us think deeply about process ownership. Being a process owner is simple, but when you dive into it, it doesn't mean a ton more responsibility. It just means really thinking diligently about what I've said here and what we've laid forth and what small things we can do little by little. So there are 4 boxes on the screen here. Again, the left is the overview and the definition of a process owner and process ownership. The middle box is responsibilities of the process owner, which we talked about being critical to the performance data, making sure the processes are documented with some sort of controls and reviews, and then looking towards being a single point of contact. And those key aspects of process ownership are on the right box: accountability, oversight, improvement, alignment, and collaboration. The box on the bottom is in orange. Many of you that have taken and been trained in process ownership see process owner and your name next to it in process manager as a tool. That is also important. I spoke very high level about what a process owner is. It also applies in process manager, and that's the role you see here in orange. Okay. And this is about thinking about approving processes in process manager, responding to that feedback loop that is enabled. Again, monitoring the adherence through process manager and holding regular reviews. Okay. And then there's a little plan, do, check, act kind of loop down there for us to think about continuous improvement. So this one pager is a nice one. You don't have to go through all the slides, but if you put this on your desk or you bookmark this one page, this is a nice, real quick thing about helping us all grow together and collaborate together. And this is really the take-home slide. So I'm going to stop there. I'm going to stop sharing here for just a minute so that we can shift gears over to talking to a real amazing process owner on our campus, Janet Spear. And give me just a second here. What we're going to do is actually, once I stop sharing here, too many buttons here. Give me just a second. For some reason, my screen, there it is. Okay. So now what we're going to do, you'll notice Janet and I are highlighted in the middle. That was a new feature we were trying to figure out. We're like, okay, for those of us facilitators, if you've ever been in a fishbowl is a tool you use in facilitation. And I said to Nick, because Nick's always my technical guru, because I'm like, I know there's a simple way in Zoom. Just put the two of us up here. Put us in the fishbowl and you'll have the gallery around us. So this gives Janet and I an opportunity. I'm going to ask Janet some fun questions here. But Janet, first off, thank you for joining us. Janet's been on vacation. I don't know if I'm supposed to say that, but Janet's been on vacation. She's like, you got to help me early on, weeks ago. So we got way out ahead of this to make sure Janet would be able to do this. So thank you, Janet, and welcome to the Process Champion Network. And thank you for always being so supportive of Process on the campus.
No, I'm glad to be here. And yeah, we've been working on this for a long time. And guess what? There's always room for improvement.
Janet comes from a background somewhat place else too. I won't give him a little teaser, but Janet comes with a lot of process knowledge prior to coming to Berkeley, which has really been great for people like myself and others to get to work with Janet because she's got a slew of knowledge in the process world alongside a slew of other knowledge in HR and other areas. So Janet, I'm going to ask you a few questions. Do you want to introduce yourself one more time just so people know where you're coming from?
So sure. So I'm Janet Spear, and I am the Director of Central Services within People and Culture. And so just for people, since Central Services, of course, so clear, what that means is that I have a business support team. We work with BIT on all the technical components related to HR. And we are also data people. So we have a reporting team. And of course, because we are the compliance arm in HR, we do a lot of reporting, and it's really important, as Chris had mentioned earlier, about how you get consistency in order for you even to become compliant and be able to feel that you are reporting things accurately. So, yeah, that's what I do. And living in this process world is always interesting.
Great, thanks, Janet. So one of the things I want to start with is the strategic importance of process ownership. So how would you describe your role as a process owner, and how does it support the broader goals of the university?
So, as a process owner, I always say that my role is really to make sure that we have clarity. As you had mentioned in some of your other comments about making sure you bring subject matter experts into discussions, I always say that I'm not a deep subject matter expert in anything. I'm a mile wide and an inch deep. But I need to know who those subject matter experts are so that we can engage them. They're the people who actually do the work or are the experts in that particular field so that we can then really dive into the details. And again, that helps bring clarity to the process. It helps make sure that people are doing the process in a consistent manner. So then that way, when you're reporting on information later, you know that you're doing an apples to apples comparison. And of course, in order for us to be able to measure things in order to be able to meet the goals and objectives of the university, we need to have this sort of process clarity and order, so that we can actually execute upon things in an efficient manner, in a timely manner, and in a compliant manner.
Great, thank you. Okay, so we're going to shift gears. So now you gave the nice strategic importance. So shifting gears, of course, that's the utopian state, perfect strategic alignment. But the opposite end of that are these real world obstacles that make you such a resilient process owner, and we have to be resilient. So what key challenges on the other end of the spectrum have you faced in managing your process, and what have you done to address them?
So I think there's two really key challenges. I think the first one is just the actual effort in order to keep your process documentation up to date. There are many times when we are putting together a new process because some law has passed or new policy has come out that we need to now design a process around. We will do that. We'll iterate through that. We'll release it. People will start working on it. And then we realize, ooh, maybe that wasn't the right thing to do. We have to go back and update it. And we are doing the work in real time. We're making changes to the process, but it takes effort to go back and actually update your documentation to show that. So I think that's always a really big effort, especially when we're resource constrained around it. I think the other thing is that, as you mentioned earlier, Chris, there's a lot of complications, and we are a very complex organization. And in HR, people have the ability to do things in different manner and still get to the same end state. But it goes back to that consistency. How do you make sure that people are doing things in a consistent manner so that when you go to measure, you have, again, that apples to apples comparison. And I think that those are kind of the two areas that are, by investing your time and doing that process documentation and keeping it up, helps to be more consistent, helps you get better metrics and a better understanding of where bottlenecks or other issues may be occurring. But it's really hard to do that because we never have enough resources to keep on top of the ever-changing process world that we live in. So those are sort of the two big challenges I see.
Great. So in that line of thinking about the people, right, and highlighting things like communication and engagement, we're in this diverse academic environment. So thinking about our stakeholders, how do you collaborate with stakeholders such as our faculty, our students, and our administrative staff to ensure that the process remains effective and inclusive for everybody?
So what I have learned over time is that it's better to be more inclusive. And that's actually really good to get the people who are actually doing the work. There have been instances where we've had meetings where we'll engage, let's say, the supervisors, who may think they know how things are done or should be done or whatever. But then when you actually meet the team lead or the person who's actually doing the thing itself, it turns out that they have discovered faster, better, easier ways, or they've sort of personalized it to their own thing, which may not necessarily be the same as other groups. A simple example I can give in this instance is we had people who, during the onboarding process, people opened up the service hub case at different times. Because some people thought it should be opened up here, and other people thought it was more important to open it up there. And when we put together the initial process, we didn't really define when do you open the service hub case. So we sort of missed that. When we ran reporting and realized that we had people who were doing things in very different manners, we got together all people again, to go through and to kind of figure out where should the right place be. And then we got everybody doing that. We've been in situations where we've had new processes developed and we've gone through 40 variations and, iterations of it before we've actually then finally released the process so that we could make sure that we were taking into consideration all the nuances, all the variations, different needs for people who are managing students versus people who are managing academics, and how do we smooth those out together. So I find it's better to be more inclusive And if you want to have somebody in there, you can, get their feedback. But to your previous point, Chris, about there being that one strong voice, you need that one, you need the collaborative group of a lot of people together in order to really build that consensus and that one strong voice.
So great to hear your examples, Janet, and how much you live and breathe this continuous improvement without even using the words continuous improvement. I think you can feel Janet's expression of this PDCA loop she's constantly living in. She's constantly turning over, having reviews, processes change, getting those that do it, taking their feedback, the process performer feedback, and bringing it back in. So, Janet, kind of going hyper fine-tuned on an example here. Can you share an example of where you've used data or metrics to really help improve or advocate for a change to a process on the campus?
Yeah, sure. And so we've been focusing, of course, quite a bit of time on the onboarding process. One of the things that we did initially when we were looking at the onboarding process is we had sort of things in buckets, components of the process in buckets. And we realized that those buckets may not necessarily be where everybody was doing the same activities, right? As we started to meet with different stakeholders would say, oh, I was doing things over here, or oh, it didn't really tell me in the process where I needed to open that ServiceNow case. And so I just made the assumption I should do it here, where somebody else made the assumption they should do it at this time in the process. So again, not being consistent, we really started to flush those out. And we discovered that when we were doing reporting, because we saw that groups of people were, one group of people were doing it consistently this way, and another group were doing it consistently that way. But when we looked at the reporting to try to do the apples to apples comparison, we saw that it was not the same. And again, had to bring in all the stakeholders again. We point out that variation. We dive in a little bit deeper with, well, why were you guys thinking you needed to do it this way? Oh, because we wanted to capture this information. Other people, oh, why did you do it that way? Oh, we didn't think it was important to capture that information. And now suddenly we had a conversation about what's important to be measuring in the process, what's important to be looking for in the process. And that really helped us then revise the process to be consistent and to have everybody be doing things in the same manner at the same time and defining those activities in a similar manner so that we could then ultimately report out exactly how long things were taking or what is the right order to be able to do it in a more efficient manner. So
Great. I'm going to ask you one more question. So I had two more, but I'm going to mash the last two questions together into one.
you
And then
got it.
if the audience has any questions, I'm not sure if we're supposed to go to 11:50 or 12, but I know we're kind of running out of time. So I'm going to mash the two questions, and if people want to stay on and ask you questions, if you have the time, that'd be great. So my last question, we live in this evolving institution of policies changing and requirements, probably more so than ever. Or I can't say that because I certainly haven't been here 150 years, but I think we're experiencing a lot of unprecedented change on the campus. And I think based on all that, I just am curious what advice you'd give someone new to the process owner role in higher education and some words of wisdom before we open it up for others.
I think the most important thing is to get to the actual subject matter experts and the people who are actually going to be doing the work. Um, they're the people who know what to do. They're the people who figured out the shortcuts, the workarounds. And those are the types of things that you want to be able to build into a process as you're designing or improving it. And you really want to get the people who do the work, not the supervisor, not the person who thinks that they know how to do the work, but the person who's actually executing upon the work. Because as I said, they're the people who know what isn't working. They want to know, they have ideas about what can change to make things work. And again, I think if you're more inclusive in getting to those people, then you have a better outcome in the long run.
That's really great. And I just want to highlight what Janet did there, coming full circle to the subject matter experts, right? Process ownership is not about high-level decision making. It's about a collaborative use of those that do the process. And it was really great to hear the words of wisdom. Janet's words of wisdom are about others, right? That's a true leader right there, is being about the others and trusting the others that do this work. And I just really want to thank you, Janet. I'm going to allow, if we have a few minutes here, I'd love others. I want to thank you for your time and all you've done on the campus. I've had the opportunity to work with you on and off over the last decade plus. Again, it's been tremendous. I really appreciate your continued support of this area and the Process Champion Network and all the work we've done. So if people have questions for Janet, I'm going to stop here. Whether you want to raise your hand or throw it in the chat, we'll take a few questions. And maybe Janet could answer those if you're willing, and then we'll send you on your way here before we head into tomorrow being our wonderful Juneteenth holiday. So if I forget to wish everybody a wonderful Juneteenth, I will do so now. So if people have questions for Janet, feel free to raise your hand. Nick, if you want to take us off the fishbowl so I don't have to stare at myself anymore, I would love that. Um, if people have questions, feel free to raise your hand or throw it in the chat. That's what happens when you do such a great job, Janet. You just questions, thoughts, comments, feedback. More kudos for Janet in the chat there from a long time, Isabel.
So in addition to any questions you may have for Janet or Chris, if there's anything that you want to highlight or successes, challenge, or shout outs of process management work in your own departments, feel free to share that as well right now. Again, this is a community practice, so we're really great to see efforts going on throughout campus.
Can I do a shout out?
Absolutely.
Great. So Joel, who's on this call, he did the Greenbelt training with you guys, and that was fantastic. And so I want to shout out to him for, and you guys as well for helping him with that and getting through that. That was awesome. And he's using it today to help us design the misconduct disclosure and release process, which is a nightmare because we do not have clarity from UCOP. And so everybody's kind of just doing their own thing. And we're using all of these activities today in the real world to try to get a better handle and clarity on that process. So shout out to Joel and to you guys for all that training and for then being able to apply it right away in the real world.
Great stuff, Joel. We really appreciate it.
I'm excited for Joel and his black belts next. So good job, Joel.
So it looks like a lot of sentiments of no questions, but really appreciating the content that Chris and Janet shared today. Just a reminder for everyone, we will be sending out the links again to that survey. So we really want to hear from the community about upcoming topics. And there is always opportunities for you to come alongside BPMO and look to us for questions and support, bring us the work that you're doing, whether it's in project management, process management, change management. We have our office hours and other online trainings and resources that are available to you on our BPMO website. All right. Any other last thoughts or questions from anyone? All right. Thank you, everyone, for joining us for this PCN community. We look forward to seeing you in 2 weeks. For those of you who are taking time off the summer, hope you have a wonderful time, and we'll see you in the next school year.
All right. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you. Thanks, Janet.
You. Thank you.